So let's help people get well. That's my mission. And if we can do it and we can document what we're doing, I think it'll be a beautiful model for other colleagues to be able to work in their communities.
Welcome to Point of Relation with Thomas Hübl, a podcast that illuminates the path to collective healing at the intersection of science and mysticism. In his conversations with visionaries, innovators, artists, and healers, Thomas invites guests into a relational experience that allows inspiration and innovation to emerge. This is the Point of Relation. Our guest for today's episode is Ruby Gibson. A woman of Lakota, Ojibwe, and Mediterranean descent, Dr. Gibson has spent the past 40 years dedicated to the craft and science of historical trauma reconciliation, cultural healing, and generational well-being amongst Native and Indigenous peoples. Dr. Gibson developed a transgenerational trauma recovery model, Somatic Archaeology, and is the author of My Body, My Earth, The Practice of Somatic Archaeology, and My Body, My Breath, a tool for transformation. We hope you enjoy this conversation.
First of all, I'm very grateful that you made the time for us and that we can have this exciting conversation. I'm looking forward to it, and I have many questions or interests, so I'm happy you're here. So first of all, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
And when you hear ancestral healing, maybe you can frame for us a little bit, I don't know, your view on that, what you hear, how you experience that, what is the world of ancestral healing for you, just to dive a bit with you into your understanding. And then let's see how we emerge our conversation from there. But I'm very interested what ancestral healing or healing ancestral trauma in our lineage, how that shows up for you. What's your experience of it? How does it work in your understanding? All that, like your universe of it.
Okay. I'll try to be as succinct as possible here. I don't refer to it as ancestral healing because the healing is really not of the ancestor, it's of the person. I call it historical trauma recovery or, something along those lines. But I can understand that catchphrase that has come. I've been doing this work for 35 years, doing historical trauma work. And, it's been a fascinating experience, especially within our community. So our community is in Rapid City, South Dakota, and we have we work on the Pine Ridge Reservation, and it's probably the poorest county in the United States, and it's a horrible life and way to live. It's it's very challenging. There's good aspects about it, but our goal is the future of Native wellness. So I look at it as a medicine that can help us reorganize wounds within ourselves or wounds within a culture in order to step forward. So I developed something called Somatic Archaeology, and that's what my book is about, and my primary work is all about that. And it has been a spiritually driven work, and we're able to raise funding so that we can provide these services to our relatives in that area, because they are very, very poor. It's the poverty level so low. So we raise money, and then we train and teach people, and then they go out into their communities and they do the work. So we're kind of like Johnny Appleseed, planting lots of seeds everywhere, hoping that our vision of a different future for Native wellness will come. So I always begin by saying that I appreciate and honor all my relatives and those who've come before me and the ones who come after me, that I stand at a bridge, like an apex. And when I stand here, I have 7 generations behind me, 7 generations ahead of me, and I'm right here in the middle. And it's such a potent place to be. From this place, we can affect what's happened and what will happen. We have so much power that we don't even know or know how to utilize or can conceptualize. So the body has been my greatest teacher, and the land. So I'm not sure if I'm going the direction that, but I can keep sharing a few more things.
Oh, please do. It's fascinating. I'm fascinated. And I love the transmission that you transmit into the space. So please keep going. Yeah, that's very good.
Mm-hmm. When I was 13, I started to do healing work. And the very first thing that happened to me was I was riding my horse home from work. And I was going through a meadow, and the horse came upon a deer standing in the meadow, just one single deer. And the horse stopped, and I looked at the deer, and she looked straight at me and said, "Please don't eat us. It's not your way." And I said, "Okay." And I haven't since that day eaten a piece of meat. And so that was 50 some years ago. And my teachings began with the earth, began with coming into relationship with all 4 worlds: the mineral world, the plant world, the animal world, and the human world. Because all are equal, all are important, all rely on each other for survival. So when we think of ourselves, we think of the great circle of life that's around us, and we think of all the components: what's beneath us, what's above us, what are we dancing in. And we use the sacred medicine wheel from the Lakota traditions, which I'm Lakota and part Ojibwe, and also part Italian or Spanish. I'm not sure. I'm a mixed blood woman, and it's since I was 13, my journey has been all about healing. And I became a licensed massage therapist, and I didn't want to have to box myself into a university or a college because they weren't teaching me what I needed. So I started teaching or studying with medicine men. I studied in Australia with the Aboriginal people. I studied in Canada with First Nations. I studied Mexico with the Otomi. I've studied numerous tribes around the United States because I wanted to understand the medicine. And I was adopted by grandfather Frank Fulsgrove, who was the spiritual leader of the Ogoalasu, and he was an amazing man. He's passed on now, but I became an adoptive parent for 6 or 8 of his great-grandchildren. And I spent a few years of my life just caring for the people, caring for the children.
Mm-hmm.
It was beautiful. You know, it's a beautiful time, but all good things have a beginning and an end. So I had a drive inside of me. And I spent maybe from the time I was 15 until I was 35, I meditated for 1 hour every day for 20 years. And it allowed me to deepen inside of my body, inside of my spirit. And I began to have conversations with the unseen world. I studied magic, shamanism, you know, all sorts of things because I was hungry. I was so hungry. And I fed myself regularly. Like I got in some very challenging situations, but I was always taken care of. And one day, Thomas, I had this dream. And the dream was that I was driving to a sweat lodge ceremony, you know, our NEP, our sacred ceremonies. And there was a grandmother next to me, and there was a medicine man in the back seat with his dog. And we were driving. The grandmother said, granddaughter, turn here. I said, no, grandmother, I know where I'm going. I kept going. Granddaughter, I really think you should turn. And I said, oh, no, we're late, and I know how to get there. Third time, granddaughter, you should turn. And I said, no, I'm almost there. And the next thing I know, the road turns to gravel and crosses a creek and goes up a hill. And there's this park up there with all these people lying on the sun and eating and things. And we stopped the car and I thought, well, this isn't the Anipi. Where are we? And I looked around and I didn't recognize anyone. And the medicine man got out of the car and the grandmother got out of the car and the police showed up and arrested the medicine man for having a dog in the park, and everything started getting chaotic. And I was standing there scratching my head, and I looked over at the grandmother and she winked at me. And she whispered in my ear, the moral of the story, granddaughter, is to always let the grandmothers drive. So in that way, I have a group of grandmothers, and they are a large group. And I'm not the center of it. It's a spiritual group that's out to heal the planet, people. It's like, like Mother Teresa. That's how they are. And they started guiding me. And as they guided me and opened doors, I was able to begin this nonprofit group and develop the work in a way. So like now we're researching and evaluating it, and I'm publishing papers on the work, which I never would have done before because I'm a real giveaway girl. My heart's for the people. So I give. Probably more than I should, but it's just who I am. So it allowed us to get some great funding. It's just kind of a long story, but in short, somatic archaeology was a vision. And in our tradition, we use a medicine wheel to track everything. The 4 stages of life, the protection. I mean, the medicine wheel is representative of the whole universe, the whole experience. And so I know if I can take a model and put it on the medicine wheel and it holds water, that it's good. And I had to do that with somatic archaeology. I had to start taking the steps because as I was doing massage, I would find someone would feel better and then they would come back with the same pain. And so I would say, well, what's under that? What's under that? What's under that? And we began digging or excavating, and it happened quite naturally. And then it kept happening. And then I noticed people were getting really well, whether it was a physical symptom or emotional or spiritual. They were able to find this recovery. And so I started working on people and training people, but I hadn't reached that point where, yes, let's take this work into a community and let it flourish. And the grandmothers gave us the opportunity. I'm sorry. It's
so beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah. The grandmothers gave us the opportunity to have some unlimited funding. And we've touched in the past 8 years millions of lives. And so, when you come to a point in life and you just feel like you're 100% ready, that there's nothing in your way, that's what happened. I had done enough of my own work, my own recovery work, that I was like completely there. And the work just started moving through me and articulating. So I watched your presentation the other day on that you gave this weekend, or something. I watched the video, and I really enjoyed listening to you talk, because that passion for cultural trauma healing is really what's in my heart. And how do we rebuild, those wounds? And how do we rebuild the people? How do we remember without wanting to be unconscious? It's like a fine line. And it's that way with our people. I'm sure it's that way there as well. We have a lot of communities of people who have been taken over or controlled, or, the conquistadors did some pretty big damage for our people. Anyways, it's been a long journey, and I'm happy to be at this place in my life right now. Because now I get to write and think of bigger things. So we're gonna open a historical trauma recovery center.
Oh, wow.
In Rapid City as our first, prototype, and then we'll see how the people do, if we can maintain our funding, and it's I can see the transformation. I can already feel the potential of it. So
It's so lovely. First of all, I deeply enjoy your transmission. Like what you transmit when you speak is so beautiful. And it touched me also. Like two things to underline that I hear when I listen to you. One is when you said when you do enough in a work that there is a point, or you experience the point when you started to ride the wave, like when it's like the energy takes over and the limitations are not anymore the strings that feel like a limitation. I think that's a beautiful description. So I just want to underline what you said, is it touched me. And the other one is also when you speak about the grandmothers, I feel your deep connection and how it touches your heart and how you transmit that. It's really beautiful. And it's a beautiful honoring also of, on the one hand, the collective, but also the lineage is so much in it when you speak. So it's very honoring and respectful and deep. So thank you for that. And I also like your the spark in your eyes when you speak about the bigger vision. That's so beautiful, because I think we need that to grow into, and then it's lovely when you speak about it. And I will come back to the bigger vision in a moment. I would love to also, for everybody listening to our conversation, I would love to hear a bit more, because I'm very interested in different ways of doing the digging that you said, because I'm very passionate about digging. And so like the revealing layers of the archaeology, the somatic archaeology, maybe you can speak a little bit about how you do that, or how the process looks like. And I think that's going to be very interesting for us to get your transmission on that.
there are 5 steps to somatic archaeology. It's really simple, because I don't think trauma is hard to heal. Not if you have the right tools. It's like getting over a bump in the road, The first step is I notice. And that's the whole wheel. Noticing yourself 360 degrees. What's happening inside? What's happening outside? Where's the most tension? What are you holding? We just kind of do an overview and intake and get a sense of the history. And sometimes we do a timeline at that period where here you are when you were born, here you are now. And then we kind of track all those things, because I've experienced that people have bundles of trauma, and teasing them apart helps them to resolve it, because sometimes the way that we bind our trauma in our body is for safekeeping, but there comes a time when it's no longer useful. So we notice. And so if someone says, well, I notice that I keep getting the stomach ache, or I have anxiety, my solar plexus. Okay. Take a few deep breaths in to that area. And we do this thing that I call breathe, ground, settle. So we breathe in, exhale down, settle on our bones. I teach this in grade school. The kids love it. We
Mhm.
breathe, ground, settle. Usually we do things 3 times because 3 is the number of creation. Huh? 1 is the seed, 2 is the root, and 3 is the flower. So we want something to flower. We say it 3 times. Anyway, as we look at that person, they're having this pain here. We take 3 deep breaths. And then I ask them to feel from the inside out. What do you notice? What do you sense in there? What's around it? And we get into the step 2 of I sense. And it's the language of the body, because our body doesn't speak in English or Spanish or anything. It speaks in sensation. And so being able to decipher sensation is part of the learning and part of their own awareness of themselves, of how they're managing. So we sense, we find that place. And it can be dense, it can be solid, it can be in the egg shape, it can be, our body comes up with so many beautiful ways of managing things that, you've just got to listen, and your body will show you once you take the time and you slow down, come out of your head into your skin, and we start to feel from the inside out. And what emerges is a bit of a story. Oh, well, I might ask questions like, when was the first time you felt that? Or anyone else in your family have that same experience? We track to see if it's a familial situation, if it's individual, simply based on sensation. And it's only important because you're going from I notice to I sense to I feel. So we start in the center of the wheel and notice, go to the west, I sense. We go to the south, I feel. And that's the place of emotion. It can be tears, laughter, shaking, some kind of movement occurs. And those 3 steps are probably the most important. I notice, I sense, and then letting whatever they're sensing make its way through. It emerges. From that point, we go to the north of the wheel, which is I interpret. So it's like a bottom-up neurophysiological process, which is what a lot of somatic therapies currently work with. I grew up near Boulder, Colorado, and that's where Peter Levine lived. We were friends, and we were both developing. He was developing somatic experiencing while I was developing somatic archaeology. There was like a seed bed here of all sorts of people who began coming up with these ideas, and they were all based on that same principle. So if you understand the body's neurophysiology, it's going to help you watch and track what changes in that person. And so for me, it's a lot about being present and maybe giving little guidance along the way. But once you notice, you sense, you feel, And then all that energy comes up into your head, and you're like, oh, that's why and you start analyzing and kind of putting it into place in your mind and in your life. And then the last step is called I reconcile. And reconciliation is so who are you when you're no longer carrying that baggage? And then we help them dream forward, through the pineal and start to envision who they are when they're not holding something or feeling anxious or in pain. Who are you when you're free from that? And then we work until we do a session and then come back once a week. It takes 7 days or 1/4 of a moon cycle to clear out all of that energy that got released into their energy field. And then it takes 7 days for it to purge through. So we come back 7 days later and do it again.
Very beautiful description. Thank you for being so precise and really guiding it. It's very easy to get, especially when you feel it in the body, how you speak about it. That's very beautiful. And when you now transition back so that's something that we do in our individual or personal, however we call it, experience. If we translate that to maybe the cultural application of it, how can we think of somatic archaeology in the archaeology of a society or a community or group? Is there an equivalent in your work? Do you do this with individuals or also in group spaces, or for the cultural trauma archaeology? Is this working every time through the individual? Of course it works through the individual, but is there anything about the collective space that is true too in that sense? Maybe you can speak a bit to your understanding here, how the cultural traumatization gets affected or can be worked on.
Okay. We have 3 wheels: the wheel of suffering, the wheel of healing, and the wheel of transformation. Mm-hmm. So this is what I was sharing with you. I notice, I sense, I feel, I interpret, I reconcile. And what do you notice now? Mm-hmm. That's one session. That's another session. Mm-hmm. So it's, I wanted to keep it very simple.
You also spoke about the bigger vision of your center and how the work's expanding. How does cultural transformation happen in your understanding, or how do we work also on cultural traumatization, the trauma we all have been born into in our societies and that shaped us, that conditioned us, that we are looking through, that we often even don't notice at first because it's so normal or so regular. And we need to, as you described your own spiritual journey, and it takes a detoxification process or a cleansing. And maybe you can speak about whatever comes up in you when you hear me speak about it, how this lives in you and in your work.
Our cultures, probably all, I think we have 360 tribes in the United States. And all those different cultures are so hesitant sometimes to share or to expose themselves. We have been under duress for 500 plus years, and there has never been any normalization. And, it's poverty is is devastating. Housing is terrible. Diet, ceremonies are good. Lots of alcoholism, meth use, and drug use. They banned alcohol on the reservation, but people still drink, and they approved marijuana. So you have this big state, Republican state of South Dakota, and then we have these reservations that are, their own culture, community lands, and it's it can be very isolating, but it can also create a boundary of safety for the people to be around their people. Because if you're native, people know and they connect with you. Because there's, we've all gone through so many changes. The tribes that were once warring with each other are now having, have had to learn to come together, because it's really survival of a pool of people that's, weak. And so we have some very strong elders and helpers, but what we have is a group of youth. They have the highest suicide rate in the United States per capita. And I spent one entire year at a school where they only had 100 Native kids. And out of that 100 Native kids, I think 20 had committed suicide that year. And there was no help, and it was a really, really bad situation. I dropped everything. I went to Montana and I worked there. I wrote a grant, got them a counselor or two counselors, and I started working with the kids. I started changing the culture of the entire, identification of the teachers, who are trying to deal with all this because they had no counselors. And at the end of the year, when graduation came in May, that year that I was there, we only had one suicide. And it doesn't take that much. I know how to do it, or the grandmothers know how to do it. And I've been very, very successful with youth suicide. So we work a lot with kids because they're our future, and because they need help. They don't have too much to look forward to. And a lot of their friends commit suicide. And then everybody's grieving, and then it's, it's a rough place. There's gangs and, all sorts of things going on, but there's also such beauty. I mean, it's just incredible how beautiful the people are and how they use laughter as a way of dealing with their grief, and how we come together at ceremonial times, sun dances, and ceremonies. That's so important. I see so many people doing work, but without helping someone to really embody their spirit. It seems to be off in a different dimension or something. But my doctorate is in theology and psychology. And I've studied all the world religions. And what we as Native American people have in our culture is that really, really strong spiritual connection to our ancestors, to our lands, and to the people. So I feel in our community, we're not even allowed to build the Indian Center, even though it's the home. It's where it's the Black Hills of South Dakota, it's the birthland. It's the place the people emerged from the earth in. And it's so Republican, and the governor wants to take all Indian history out of history books in our state. I mean, it's just, we're dealing with racism. So have to be so bold, and I think it's time. I think it's just time to say, all right, Indian health services run by government is not very effective. So let's help people get well. And that's my mission. And if we can do it and we can document what we're doing, I think it'll be a beautiful model for, other colleagues to be able to work in their communities. So, it's a little bit precarious. I feel pretty bold making these statements, but my heart and my vision and these grandmothers will not let me rest until we do this.
Yeah, I can totally feel that when you say it. Right. And so first of all, it touches me very much, and I'm also really sorry to hear like some of the things that are going on, or the suppression and the racism that's happening, and I'm wondering also, because to me it always feels like such a challenge also how to do trauma healing when ongoing trauma is happening the whole time. Basically, there's no rest, kind of, so that we can recover in a kind of very safe space, because the cause that caused it stopped. So that's not happening. So I'm wondering how, like, what are ways to do like that kind of inner healing work that basically opens us up and reconnects us to do that while permanently there's racism or re-traumatization happening. And can you speak a bit to that? Because I think it's very important to, because there are different, you can do trauma work in places where the traumatization stopped and you're dealing with the aftermath, or we need to deal with the historic trauma while the traumatization is going on, which is much more complex. And so maybe you can speak to us a bit of your experience of how to do that well, or maybe also what can not go well when we start opening traumatizations while it's still going on.
Yeah, I think it's probably pretty different from culture to culture. In our lands, we say, today's a good day, I'm above ground. It's kind of survival based. There are people who are very functional and very healthy and doing great things. And then there's a lot of people who are really suffering. And when I first started there, opened the Freedom Lodge, our nonprofit group there, I started talking about historical trauma, people just sat there and looked at me. They didn't even know what to say. Or people would say, there's no such thing as historical trauma. Or, who are you? I mean, it was difficult to get it past the adults, specifically because we have a lot of Anglo teachers on the reservation, which is always kind of contrary in some ways, but people are slowly repairing themselves and their lives. But it's the kids who have come into all the kind of mud and muck of all that history, from, just everything. I'm not going to go into it, but probably like age 10 to 20 is where I think transformation can happen within our community. And if you get the kids involved, the parents will get involved. If they're not in jail, we have a lot of our men are in jail. Huge, disproportionate amount in South Dakota, but there's a lot of women who run their families and raise their kids. And we have a word, it's called tioshpe, and tioshpe means the bigger family, like not just mom and dad and kids, but all the relatives, all the, uncles, aunties, and, the tioshpes are big. And when that information, when someone improves or changes, there can be a really good kind of response from the community. But and this comes from trauma. What happens is it's like lobsters in a bucket. As one person climbs up to get better, the rest pull them down as they're trying to go. So people are shamed for getting better sometimes. And that, for me, is the crux of the issue we have here. I don't know as in depth in other communities, but
to me, everything you said so far makes a lot of sense. Like everything lands very clearly in my body, and I can resonate with every word you're saying. That's why I feel very connected to many things, from the work that you do to the collective work. It makes a lot of sense. Also this, like, sometimes on the one hand, this loyalty to the trauma, and when we get better, like what happens in the person, but also what happens in the community, that dynamic, I think, is very interesting to look at. And then also, like, what we sometimes feel is the hierarchy of trauma between different communities or different populations, who like the scarcity at the base of trauma, like the lack of so many things, that creates this vacuum. And so I'm always looking how we can create spaces to embrace that vacuum and bring generosity into the deep felt sense of scarcity that comes with the ongoing and collective traumatization. And I see this also in, as you said, because you asked if that makes sense, also how it's in other communities. I have experienced that also with the healing, like climbing out and pulling down. I have seen this in different places. think that's a very interesting dynamic to look at what is actually on a deeper level happening there. Yeah. So
If
everything. Sorry, go ahead.
if you're stuck, you want everybody to be stuck with you.
Mm, mm,
It's, I don't know, it's a twisted way of thinking, but that's what trauma does, you know.
mm,
And again, not everyone's like that. We have some really healthy and dynamic and kind of like fighters in our community. They're they really want to improve, but we don't want help from the outside community.
mm.
So, you know, it's people come and they try to do things, but if we can build it in house, it's going to make a big difference rather than dropping in and doing a little workshop for kids on trauma and then leave.
Exactly. No, I know exactly. Yeah, yeah. That's why, like when I heard your vision and I felt how your spirit lit up when you spoke about it, like that is so touching. That's why I said it at the beginning. That was a touching moment for me to listen to you, because I think that's so needed. And I think, to me, everything you say feels very, very aligned and connected. Also, the way you speak about it feels very embodied to me, and I can directly like receive without any mediated, complicated kind of interface. So this, yeah, I'm deeply touched by your work, and I'm so happy you're doing all you're doing, and I would be very happy to be in any way of support or connected and stay connected. I think you're doing a beautiful work. It touches me when I listen to you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When I was watching you, I had the same experience. And I was like, oh, he's on the same page.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's what I feel the whole time when I listen. Exactly what you're saying now. I felt also this deep resonance and and I think many things, how you describe the somatic archaeology work. I mean, that's very close to how I experience it too, and also this, yeah, very much so, and also the spiritual dimension that you bring in, and this deep respect for the lineage of spirit. That is very beautiful. I think in the especially in the Western modern world, I feel that there's something very precious has been lost when we don't respect that the lineages and the elders and where we come from. So this feels deeply touching to me.
Been playing with this new idea of I call it blood and bones, and taking groups of Native women to some of the battlegrounds and burial sites of our people, and praying for them to cross over, because sometimes they just get stuck in that battleground, and then it makes the ancestors or the next generation stuck too. So it's for Mother Earth, because she's the one who's holding it. So we're looking to lighten her load, and as well to have a place for people to grieve and to just really kind of know they're doing a good thing and setting their relatives free. I think that has never been done at the scale that it needs to be done. I think people have done it in their own little communities, but there's still finding grave sites, especially of children. I mean, they just recently found a couple of them because children were put in boarding schools, in their forced boarding schools, and they would die and they wouldn't tell their parents, they'd just bury them. I mean, It's just the pain is so great, but the healing, the call for healing, so that we can be strong again as people, I think it can really change. Because, most Native people feel like they're the caretakers of the earth. I mean, that's our primary relationship is with our mother. And Mother Earth has a mother. She has a lineage too, right? And so, it's important to honor her lineage because her grandmothers and great-grandmothers are not very happy at the way we're treating their daughter. So we want to go to those places and just pray and ask for forgiveness and release the ancestors from those battlegrounds so that we can settle down. I mean, the cultural work piece is big. It daunts me. And that's why I'll do it. You know what I mean? It's like a challenge, huh?
That's right. And so important. I think, I saw this when in the first 20 years ago, when I started to work mainly in Europe and also in Germany after the World War and the Holocaust. And it's very similar to what you described. It's like how many kind of souls didn't cross over, and you can feel the depletion or the depression in the field. And it's very similar. We had very similar experiences to what you shared right now, and also how you feel the liberation when it opens up and it can start to move again, and it's moving on. So how it changes our life today, and I think I think that's very important cultural work. Yeah.
Well, I would love to do some kind of project or work with you. So just because it feels like we could support each other.
Very much so. I felt it the whole time. So I'm happy you're saying this. I would love that too. And maybe we stay connected and see what are ideas that are coming up for us. If you have ideas, I will write to you, and then we see what feels right. But there's such a strong resonance. There's for sure something that can be born through us. Yeah. Thank you so much. This was very deep, very close. It touched me. It was very profound to listen to you. So thank you.
Thanks for listening to Point of Relation with Thomas Hübl. Stay connected and get updates about new episodes by visiting our website, pointofrelationpodcast.com, and by subscribing to the Thomas Hübl YouTube channel. If you enjoyed this video, please like it and share about us with your community on social media. Thank you. We appreciate your support.